Hey everyone, I wanted to pop in today. It says my live video is starting. It usually is pretty uh, instantaneous though. So I hope everyone's well and not too stressed out about everything going on in the world today. But I know that there is an underlying current of uncertainty that is being fueled by, the news media and everything going on with the stock market, and we're up and down. And so traditionally in the world of divorce, when things start happening that way, when people start getting nervous, it makes them feel like, oh no, like now we're stuck and we're going to not be able to move forward. And in the traditional model of divorce, if you're using two attorneys and that's super cost prohibitive, that might be sort of true. But I want to talk to you today about how you can finesse your timelines and really take control of your process so that you can move forward um, now if you want to. And when I say move forward, and people ask me questions about the program that I run my clients through, and we're saying it's going to be 6 months. That does not mean, even if you're working with me, that you are divorced in 6 months. It does not even necessarily mean that you're living in two households in 6 months. And that's the part that I really want to stress for anybody who's worried about, we don't have the financial ability to get divorced at this moment. You might not actually want to be like divorced legally at this moment. And that's one of the kind of silver linings of taking control of your process. You guys can make the decisions. You guys can write the contract that will become part of your divorce down the road. But when you write a contract between the two of you, and you call that a separation agreement. Some states call it a separation agreement. Some states call it a settlement agreement. Whatever you call it, bottom line is it's a contract between the two of you, and you need to think of it as the roadmap for what steps you're going to follow as you're moving towards a final divorce decree. So it's a roadmap and an insurance policy, because once you sign it, it does become legally binding. So in the way the divorce process works is every couple, whether or not you do it the traditional way or you hire a mediator or you work through me, every couple is moving towards a settlement agreement. A very small number of cases where the divorce is, you know, um, there's no nice way to say it. But like, I think in a very small number of cases, somebody is like irrational enough to force the case into actual litigation. So your case is going to end up somewhere between like we're staying completely out of the court system and we're going to do this ourselves, to we're going to ask a judge to actually make our decisions for us because we can't communicate or agree on anything. It's really very rare that couples end up in that very far extreme, because even if your divorce process starts out super contentiously and it looks like you're heading in that direction, when you get like into the first year of dealing with your lawyer and seeing how expensive that is, and I think it's sort of on purpose. I think the court system is designed to take forever and to cost you tens of thousands of dollars. And I think it's sort of on purpose to keep you out of the courtroom, to keep the judge's calendar not clogged up. So we would call that clearing the docket. Like, they want to make it so aggravating that you don't end up wasting a week of the judge's time with a full hearing. Okay. So that process, though, is one where you don't have control. And even if you decide to settle at the last minute, you're still ending up with this contract, which brings me back to the DIY divorce. Okay. If you really want to start making decisions, you can do that and think of it as we are just starting to build this contract between ourselves. We understand that, one of us is going to need maybe 18 months before we can refinance the house. Or we understand that we don't want to put the house on the market until our youngest has graduated from high school. Those decisions are things that might be happening in the future, but you put them in your contract now. Okay. So the first thing to think about when you're trying to get divorced or really move forward in uncertain times is that you can control the timeline. You don't want to rush into anything. You want to try and stay in two houses for as long as you can because it relieves the financial pressure. And it also allows you to plan calmly um, before you take the next steps. So the traditional way is like somebody files for divorce and that other person says now like I'm finding a place to live. That is really inflaming the situation, making it more stressful, making it way more money. So I urge you, if you want to do a DIY divorce, to figure out everything you can to stay in the same house together for as long as you can. Okay. Typically, with clients who work with me, we decide first who's going to move. Then we decide, like, are we selling the house, refinancing? And you start thinking through that timeline. If you decide which party is going to move out, the next question is, what has to happen before that person can move out? It might be we need to split bank accounts. So then you can start, the pieces will start to fall into place. So really the first, area to think through if you want to do a DIY divorce is, what is your ideal vision for the future? Is it when this divorce is over, pretend it's happening now? Are we both in separate houses? Have we both downsized a little bit? Are we renting in a complex close by each other? Is one of us keeping the house? So you've got to have a firm vision on what you think you want your life to look like after the divorce. And then you start building in backwards. Okay. And so you can totally do this yourself. This is like sort of the tips and tricks that I work with my clients to help them do all of this. But we always start with that vision for your future and then decide, okay, what's the first thing that needs to happen to start us moving in that direction? Okay. And so I'm looking at my notes real quick. So the timing and keeping control of the timeline is done on purpose so that you don't feel financial pressure, so that you can wait until, it's summer. So you're not trying to move in the middle of the school year or whatever it might be that's your goal. So take control of your timeline and understand that just because you might not want to move until the summer, that doesn't mean you can't finalize those decisions now. Sign a settlement agreement or settlement contract now that will give you the roadmap for what happens then. Okay. The other thing that I tell all my clients, and which is important for you guys to know, like I said, when you sign the settlement agreement, you're not divorced legally in the eyes of the law, but you are technically, your divorce process is sort of over because the settlement agreement should be comprehensive and you guys should include, and I have a free checklist on my website, I think. And if you can't find it there, DM me and I'll send it to you. Like all of the things that need to be included in your settlement contract so you don't miss anything. So you're going to talk through with your spouse, or if they're not communicating with you, write it up yourself and say, we can be done if you sign this. Or how do you want, like, this is my thoughts. What are your thoughts? And then you can talk to each other to finesse it and adjust, sign it, and your divorce process is essentially over. All that is left to happen after that is to actually drop the paperwork off at the courthouse. Whether or not you do that sooner rather than later, that's totally up to you. A lot of people sign the settlement contract because they want the roadmap, they want the insurance, they want to feel like they're out of limbo. So you sign the settlement contract, and then you on purpose don't get divorced for a little bit longer because you're trying to preserve health insurance benefits. So I routinely write up settlement agreements that say we're signing this now, but we're not going to be divorced until at least January of the following year, or whatever that time frame might be for your family. So again, it's like thinking you're going to sign the contract now, but you're not going to pull the trigger on some of its terms, some of the decisions until later. So the timing of all those things you want to write out in this contract. That I call it, like, consider all of the what ifs. Like, but what if a year from now wife still doesn't qualify to refinance the mortgage into her name? Well, then you should say there that, like, if that happens, we're going to sell the house and divide the proceeds, or whatever it might be. But good contract writing, and anyone can do this. You don't have to be a lawyer. Lawyers will make it look fancier. And, if you're working with me, that the contract has a lot of other language in there that lawyers love and is important, but it is not absolutely necessary in order to get divorced. So what's necessary to get divorced in most jurisdictions is that you can prove to the court that you have severed your financial ties to each other, or you've come to an agreement on how to do that. So, it doesn't have to be super fancy, but you want to consider as many what ifs as you can, because that's what helps avoid court and fighting later. So you consider the what ifs in all of the different areas where things could go wrong or things could change. Like I've written it up, it usually is with the house. Like, what if a year goes by and I still can't refinance? Well, does the house get sold? Sometimes I write them up so that the other party can try to refinance. If you're really trying to keep the house for the kids, that's one of the decisions that you would make as part of this process. Like, okay, well, what happens? Is it really important that we maintain this house, or is it fine to sell it? We'll both start fresh, et cetera, et cetera. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Like, we've got cars, we've got bank accounts. You might have a 401k account. The all of those things can be and should be divided, but again, you control the timeline. So if for some reason you think it's not in your financial best interest to divide those things right this second, you can write a contract that says we're going to divide that as of the, October 31st, 2023. So I guess the big idea is that just because the timing might not be perfect right now in terms of some of your assets, that doesn't mean you can't get in writing the decisions about those assets, even if the trigger is happening later. Because to move forward with a divorce, all you need to have is the decision made. The assets don't actually need to be divided, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, shoot me a DM or post the question in the group, and I'll be happy to answer for you, because some of these things, it's intimidating, right? Like, and that's what I try to do in family transitions, is kind of like lift the veil off of this. But what I have discovered for sure is that any family if they are given the information they need to evaluate their circumstances and they feel secure that they're not missing anything, they can avoid courts and lawyers. Okay. And that avoiding courts and lawyers is really the second way to move forward with a DIY divorce, or any divorce in an uncertain economy. Because if you're concerned at all about your financial future, I mean, to me, even if it's not an uncertain economy, what's critical in every divorce is preserving as much assets as you can and not hemorrhaging that money to needless legal procedures. And I hear this happening over and over again. The traditional model of divorce, when you hire that lawyer, it triggers a responsibility on the lawyer's part to start asking for information from your spouse. And it's literally like, it's just the way the process goes. The request for information is what becomes super time consuming and super expensive. And it's really probably not necessary in most cases. In 25 years, I literally don't think I've ever had one case where there was money being squirreled away, hidden in a way that they were trying to prevent the other spouse from getting it. So you could be chasing, your lawyer has an obligation to ask for it so that you can't come after them for malpractice, just in case there's an account in the Cayman Islands. But most of my clients have been married a very, very long time. They know each other very well. They know what their salaries are. Every once in a while, I have a case where it's usually the wife hasn't been paying attention too much, which is fine. To make the contract really airtight, you've got to be fully comfortable that you've been made aware of the account balances, whatever, whoever's name they're in. So that disclosure is really important. So the lawyers, their version of disclosure takes months of time and is super expensive. You ask the question, the other side has 30 days to respond, then your lawyer is going to charge you to go through it all. Then their lawyer is going to ask you the exact same questions. You have 30 days to respond. So you're like months into it and like literally nothing has happened yet because the lawyers won't start negotiating on the settlement proposal until they're confident that they know what all those amounts are. If you're doing this yourself, you're doing this with me or any other mediator, you cut to the chase, you guys know what those amounts are, or you ask to exchange more tailored statements. Like, I want to see the statements for the end of the year, December 31st, whatever. And as long as you're comfortable, you move forward. It should not be holding up the process. All of those statements are accessible at the click of a button online. So things can move much faster, right? So if you're worried about finances at all, you want to do everything you can, obviously, to spend as little on attorney's fees as necessary, okay? My clients do spend usually zero on attorney's fees. They're paying me, but they're still paying me far less than they would be paying two attorneys, and they're moving through the process much faster, right? But what I always say, you don't want to be sending the lawyer's kids to college. Every penny that you can save is going to be necessary for first and last month's rent or new furniture or your own kids' college. It's much better spent or being preserved within the family than financing some third party who doesn't return your calls. And the dealing with lawyers just ramps up the stress and the expense. So it's something, if you're already anxious about life in general, you don't want to add to the situation in that way. So that's my second tip on how to do this on your own, is really know that you can do it on your own and do as much as you can without putting yourself in the hands of lawyers or the court system. Okay. As you're writing the contract, remember all of those what ifs so you can address those things and think of it as we don't know what's going to happen in 5 years, but we're going to do everything we can to anticipate. The custody is a perfect example. How long do you want a third person, another significant other, to be in the picture before your kids are introduced to her or him? What do you think is going to happen? What age do you want the kids to get cell phones? So you could sort of address all of those things in your settlement agreement and your custody arrangement. And that way, if a fight comes up down the road or there's something you think, well, let's look at the agreement. We thought about this, and you pull it out. And so it really is your insurance policy in that way. So you've got lots of control, and you control the timeline and you reduce the financial pressure by slowing things down a little bit and staying in the same house a little bit longer. So I know that's completely unconventional, but it absolutely works. And for some families is absolutely necessary. Sometimes I don't actually move parties, couples into two households until we have the refinancing complete, or until we know that we have split another bank account so that the other person can move. And in those situations, just like we're saying before, in terms of the what ifs, you say, we intend to stay in the same home until husband has received the money from the Vanguard account, whatever it is. At that time, husband still has 60 days to stay in the house while he's looking for another place. Okay, then you think through the what ifs. Like, I've literally done this, and it makes me laugh because my couples are always like, oh no, that's not going to happen. Like, what happens if at the 60 days the husband still refuses to move out? And now you certainly are going to be wanting him out. So then you can put in there, like, if in 60 days he refuses to move out, he becomes a tenant and now he owes me rent in this amount. And if he signs that, if you consider the what ifs and you write them down, that becomes a legally enforceable contract. Okay, so considering all of the what ifs, it makes the contract a little bit longer and it makes it maybe feel a little bit more complicated, but ultimately it's much safer for you because you don't have any holes. There's nothing you've missed, right? So keep that in mind. So I want you all to feel like, I guess, a little bit of relief that you're not stuck. I know people come into this group in all different phases of separation and divorce. A lot of times people are saying, I don't know if I want to be divorced. I don't know if I want to be separated. But if you are thinking that you need to be separated, but you feel like it's will never work financially, just know that that's not true and that you can take complete control. Okay, you can do it yourself for sure, but I do want to make everybody aware that if you want some more support, I do have a course, a DIY divorce course that I am launching. And if you're interested in finding out about that, the DIY course will walk you through each of the decisions that needs to be made and then give you a template for this contract. So you will have everything you need to really wrap it up and then find out how to pull your divorce forms off the internet for your state and your county if you decide you want to actually be divorced. So if anyone is interested in getting that support, the way the course is working at this early stage, I'm recruiting beta students, and so the price is less than it will be. It's only $500 for the entire course, and that would be both you and your spouse could access it. And what I'm asking is for feedback at week 4 and week 8, then you'll be done. And also, I want to talk to my students about a weekly check-in. So I want to, I'm not just enrolling you in the materials and then abandoning you. I do want to stay in touch and coordinate with my students, if they want to do a weekly Zoom call, so I can know where you're stuck, if you're stuck. So the goal is to get you through to the end with a settlement agreement that becomes a binding contract where you have controlled the timeline, and then you will decide at the end, are we dropping this off and actually getting that legal piece of paper, or are we going to hold off? But all of that's explained in the course as well. So just know that where there's a will, there's a way. I never want to push people into divorce, but if you're in a toxic situation or you really feel like it's not healthy, I guess I just want you to know that you're not actually stuck. So don't tolerate something that you know is really not healthy for anyone because you think you're stuck. Just keep believing that there is a way forward and believing you have the power to do it. And trust me when I tell you, you do. The lawyers don't want you to know, but you can absolutely do it yourself. So hang in there. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to shoot me a DM or leave a comment. I will put the link to my calendar. So if you want to have a quick call so I can explain the course aspect to you in more detail, I'd be happy to do that if you think it's something you're interested in. Again, it's only $500. So I'm sort of giving it away. It's less than 1 hour of legal time in most places, but I really want to make sure that people can access the help that they need. And you are actually helping me a little bit as well, because I want to be able to make that course as awesome as it can be before I launch it out into my phase 2 plan, which is um, employee benefits packages and having corporations offer it to their employees. So stay in touch. Let me know if you need anything, and thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.